Hey, so welcome to the DevOps Summit 2021, Canada Summit. I'm really excited to be here. Today, I'm going to talk about progressive delivery and safely experimenting with features in production. My name is Ulrika Lewinsky, and I'm a group product manager at GitLab. So a little bit about me. My name is Ulrika Lewinsky, as I said, and I am currently the group product manager of the managed stage at GitLab. And I'm also an ambassador at the DevOps Institute. I hold a BSc in computer engineering and an MBA in business, specializing in data systems and cybersecurity. Previously, I was the director of R&D infrastructure at Celebrite. And as part of this position, my job was to lead the DevOps department, where I found my passion for CI/CD. In previous roles, I helped transition R&D from waterfall to agile. Previous roles that I held include director of QA, director of product management, and I also worked in numerous companies of different sizes. And I'm also a mother of 3 girls and a certified pastry chef. So to get started on our talk today about progressive delivery, I want to go back and discuss the concept of continuous delivery. And continuous delivery is a software development discipline where you build software in such a way that the software can be released to production at any given time. It doesn't mean that it actually is released to production, but it can be. You can achieve continuous delivery by continuously integrating the software done by a development team, building executables and running the automated tests on those executables to detect problems ahead of time. Furthermore, you can push these executables into increasingly production-like environments to ensure the software will work in production. So the Cicd pipeline has the CI section, which is building and testing everything that we're creating. This includes unit tests, integration tests, and so on. And the CD portion includes the review stage, the staging environment, and then eventually deploying to production. So today we're going to talk about progressive delivery, which was a term that was coined by James Governor from Red Monk. And he said progressive delivery is continuous delivery with fine-grained control over the blast radius. And what progressive delivery does is it ensures the strength and flexibility of a system through numerous creative experimentations. And that's what we're going to talk about today. How do we experiment with deploying features to production without it actually exploding in our face? So this is what we want to discuss. I want to start with a rather soft concept that is called review apps. Review apps provide an automatic live preview of changes made in a feature branch by spinning up a dynamic environment for your merge request. So if we think about the fact that we have a master branch where all the main development is done, we have different feature branches. It could be a topic branch. It could be even a smaller than a topic branch. And for every merge request that is done, every code change, every pull request that is done on that branch, you can spin up a review app, which is a production-like environment that lets you see what the code looks like before it actually hits production. So it allows designers, product managers, really anyone, even your customers, to check out the changes without having to spin up a sandbox environment, without having to look over your shoulder and look on your production machine or development machine. And it lets you really get that production-like feel and see what the specific change is going to look like before it's actually merged into the master branch, and without needing to push it to a staging environment, and of course not a production environment. On top of the review apps, visual reviews lets you and your peers give you feedback directly into the merge request, and tells you, you can even type in, this UI component doesn't look good, maybe you should change the color, and that will go back into your merge request via comment and let you really take action and collaborate on it. This is what review apps looks like in GitLab. It's a dynamic environment that's spinned up for the merge request. And once you hit the View App button here, or you click on the URL itself, you're routed to that production-like dynamic environment that you can visualize that new code. And you don't have to be logged into GitLab in order to do that. You can just send that URL to anyone. It could be your sales that wants to show a demo of the new product, the new functionality. And it's a really, really powerful way to get that feedback before you actually push it into production. So this is one of my favorite slides. I don't always test my code, but when I do it in production. This is really the base of this presentation that we're talking today, and that's how do we actually test in production safely. I mentioned in my introduction that in the past I managed QA teams, and the notion of testing in production would have given me nightmares as a QA manager. The idea that someone could somehow impair or taint the database or data on production would have literally kept me awake at night. But as we know, there really is no better way to check a release post-deployment, since there is no environment that's going to be exactly the same as production. Really, even if we have a staging environment, there's going to be some difference that we didn't think of, and that's going to differ from production. And without actually testing a change on production, there would always be some nasty surprise that would surface when we would test in staging or in a testing environment that we just didn't see. So today, testing in production is a common practice as long as we do it in a controlled and monitored fashion. Developers and testers alike have learned to trust their deployments and safety nets around the development pipeline to trust testing in production. So the first method that I want to introduce is called blue-green deployments. In blue-green deployments, you deploy to two different environments, while blue is the one that's actually exposed as your production environment. And developers they start as a starting point where both the environments are exactly the same, and they continue development on the green environment. Once the developers are ready and they feel confident in their features that they deployed, they're ready to swap the environments. So now, where all the traffic of all the users was routed to the blue environment, now once we swap the routing, the new production environment becomes the green one. And all the user traffic is routed to the new production environment, and development now continues on the blue. This is really great, but there's one really big downside, and that's that if something goes wrong, all the development that we did has to be rolled back to the previous blue environment, the blue deployment, which means that all the development that we did, all the new features are drained back and users don't have any access to it. And even if there's just one faulty feature and I deployed 5, I have to drain everything back. So that's a big downside. The next methodology that I want to introduce is called Canary Releases. And in Canary Releases, you start with all your machines or Dockers or pods at 100% of the current deployment. And when you're ready to try out your new deployment on a subset of your users, let's say just 2% of the users, in an example, where we have 100 machines, 2 of the servers are going to get this new deployment. You're going to send 2% of the users of our population there. You're going to need to create some logic to figure out who is actually those users getting that new experience, and whether or not you're going to use that user routing decision to be sticky, which means that you're going to have those same users every time they log in get the same experience. And you're probably going to want to do that. Now, the big difference between blue, green, and canary is that you're doing this on a subset of users and not 100% of your users. So if we started by talking about the previous production environment being all on blue, now only 2% of the users are going to get that green environment, that green deployment with the new functionality. So the majority of your users are still going to be on the old production environment, and only a very small subset are going to be on the new one. And now you're going to start soliciting feedback, seeing if everything's okay, if there's no errors, if there's no degradation in performance. And if everything's okay, you can increase the exposure to additional users from 2% to 5% to 10% to 20% until you reach that 100%. And so you have a lot more control in Canary than in blue-green, because you're basing everything on feedback and only a subset is exposed to this new functionality. We still have that same downside that if something goes wrong, everything needs to be drained back, all the features and not only the faulty feature. But again, if something goes horribly wrong, really only that control, that subset, is exposed to that new functionality. This is what Canary Releases looks like in GitLab. You can see we have a staging environment where we rolled out the entire, the entire new functionality, the new production environment. Everything's at 100%. You can see the full green boxes. And in production, you can see that we're rolling this out much slower. So there's 59% in the new environment, and we still have people on the old. You can also control the ability to stop rolling out if you see something is wrong. So you can abort, which means that it's going to stay in that state of 59%. Nothing else is going to continue rolling out. Or you can even roll back in case there's a catastrophe and something is not working as expected. You can roll back everyone to the previous deployment, to that blue environment that we talked about. Adding on to that Canary and blue-green deployment, I want to discuss feature flags. Feature flags can be used as a part of software development to enable a feature to be tested even before it's completed and ready. So in blue, green, and Canary, we waited for everyone to be fully confident to roll it out to production. In feature flags, there's a lot more flexibility because you don't have to wait for the feature to be complete. A feature flag is used to hide, enable, or disable a feature during runtime. So the unfinished features are hidden or toggled, so they don't even appear in the user interface. And that's why you don't have to wait in order to introduce them in production, because they're simply not reachable. So even if the feature is not ready and not complete, you can still have them inside your code without it causing any harm. This allows many small incremental versions of software to be delivered without the cost of constant branching and merging. It's a simple if or else, on, off. So it's really, really easy to maintain. When you think about it, feature flagging is basically Canary, but it's for features. It allows you to roll out features gradually, slowly exposing the features. And if something goes wrong, you can simply confine the feature to a smaller audience or to a different environment, or just turn it off. And the feature still lives in production. It's just simply not available. So what you can see here is very similar to the Canary release, where we had everything on blue, and then we started rolling out everything onto green, but they're hidden behind the feature flag. So really the blue and the green are exactly the same. And then you can start turning on the flags and get this new features out to more users and get that feedback. Feature flags in GitLab looks like this. You can see we have the toggle. You can see there's features that are on or off, and you can see to which environments they're enabled, and even which strategies. So you can have different types of strategies. One that I'm going to talk about in the next slide is percent rollout, which means that very similar to Canary, we can decide that a feature is going to be enabled for a specific percent of users, 2%, 25%, whatever you decide. Or you can have specific users by some kind of ID or some kind of rules, or you can change it by different environments. You may have more than one production environment, and you may want to enable different users on different environments and so on. So there's really a lot of room to play with this. So as I mentioned, the feature flags in GitLab support several strategies, and such as user ID and user list, and they allow you to define specific users or groups of users that will either have access or will be denied access from this new functionality. And you can just apply different feature flags and strategies for the different environments. And you can even have multiple strategies per environment. And this kind of gives you a high level view of what's going on for each flag, where it's enabled, for who, and etc. So as I mentioned, we have something called percent rollout. And what this looks like is that feature flags works as an if or else inside your code. And realistically, some of the users are going to match that criteria and some will not. So they're either going to reach the if statement or they're going to reach the else statement to use the new functionality. And very similar to Canary, it allows you to get immediate feedback for this new functionality. So in this example, I enabled the feature for 10% of the users, and granted everything is working okay, I can now decide to increase the functionality to 30%, to 50%, to 70%, up until you reach 100%. A really nice benefit that's gained from feature flags that doesn't exist in Canary is that the rules and conditions can change on the fly for any given time. So let's say that I wanted to enable a specific feature only for new users that have just first signed into my website. And now I want this experience to be also changed to new users that I now define as not only the first time that they sign into the system, but also people that have been using the system for less than 30 days. You can change this on the fly, and it's very, very flexible. Sorry, so what's the difference between really Canary and feature flags? And this table kind of summarizes it. There's a few more differences, but I want to walk through some of them. So where they are placed. In Canary, they're placed in the traffic, in the networking layer, and in feature flags, they're in the application layer. That means that who can also handle these feature flags changes, because when you think about who can touch the networking layer, it's usually going to be someone very technical, someone that has permissions to where our servers live or wherever the deployment is. And so that's usually DevOps engineers, IT, SREs, and so on. And when it's an application layer, it really can be anyone on the team. Because it's so simple to toggle on and off the feature flag, it can be anywhere on the team. It could be developers, it could be product managers, it could be QA engineers, it could be customer support, and so on, et cetera. It really can be anyone. There's different types of strategies that are supported for this different functionalities. So percentage of traffic of users, that's supported for both. Whitelisting or allowing a deny list or an allowed list is supported on both. Rule-based, this is really great. For feature flags, because this is based on your application, you can set rules based on the logic of your application. So if, for example, I had an application that helps people create playlists for different ways that they want to listen to music, you can decide to group people based on how many songs they have in a playlist, or set a different kind of rule based on your application logic. So for example, again, if we're still talking about playlists for songs, let's say you can group people based on what type of music they like, pop music or rock music or whatever. You can group people based on that in your application, which is not something that you can do in Canary or in Blue-Green. And the most important difference between the two is the way that you roll back. And we talked about this, that the biggest downside for Canary and Blue-Green deployments is that you have to roll back everything. In feature flags, since really every feature is hidden behind its own flag, you can just turn off that faulty flag. There's no reason to drain all the traffic or drain all that development that you did. If there's one thing going wrong, you can just turn that off. So that's really, really the biggest difference between the methodologies. Combining feature flags with Canary is a trend that I've been seeing lately in the market, and it really lets you get the best of both worlds. You can deploy Canary releases with all of the feature flags turned off, and then you monitor the Canary. And if everything is working fine with the Canary, you can now slowly start turning on the flags and getting feedback. And once you're confident that the Canary is stable, you slowly turn on, monitor the feature flags individually, see if you can increase exposure to more and more users. And then again, when you monitor it, you saw that for some reason you can't increase exposure, you can drain traffic back to a smaller subset of users, or even turn the flag off entirely. And that doesn't require rolling back the entire deployment. You just turn off the flag. So the rest of the features and that new Canary can still roll out to production, which is really, really powerful. A/B testing is not really a development practice, but I think that after talking about feature flags, it's something that's really important to mention. And A/B testing can be thought of as an extension of feature flags. It allows you testing of variables on different groups of data and monitoring which is the preferred method. So let's take a different example. Let's take an example of a website that wants to increase sales and wants to check which workflow is going to result with users adding more items to their cart. Developers can experiment with different user flows inside their website and to actually check, sending the users to different routes in the website and really check which one resulted in the fact that more users added more items to their carts. And at the end of the day, when we finish the experiment, that's going to be the chosen workflow for all the users. You monitor the website for some time, it could be a month, it can be 3 months, and to see which flow results in the most revenue. So this is really great because it's not only a performance measurement. It actually has business goals. And it's also a really efficient way to test the change on usability. And based on the test results, which can be, again, business goals, better performance, customer engagement, and more, make a really business decision on which is going to be the flow that's going to stick at the end of the day with all the users for the website. This also introduces this concept to people outside the development team. It can be marketing teams, it can be sales teams, it can be user experience and more, to really get this valuable feedback from customers that at the end of the day has a result on your bottom line. So we talked a little bit about progressive delivery and the different methods that we have. I want to talk a little bit about pros and cons. So we're going to start with the pros of progressive delivery. The first one being the ability to control feature distribution. And this is what we discussed. We can decide based on different criteria who and what percent of subset of users are going to be accessible to this new functionality. In case there is a failure, only a small subset of users are exposed and not your entire audience. You have the ability to test in production before rolling out to users. So you can even start with enabling the feature only for internal users. So let's say you decide to group everyone by the domain of your company. So I'm going to take GitLab as an example. If I enable this feature for anyone who has an email at gitlab.com, and then solicit the feedback from my internal users before exposing this to external users. So that's a really safe way to experiment in production. You get fast feedback and metrics for new features, and you can make really data-driven decisions based on whether you need to increase or decrease exposure to this. There's more people on the team that can manage the new features in production because it's so easy. You don't need to know too much in the networking layer or how things are connected. It's really easy to toggle on and off the switch. And in case there's a huge catastrophe and you see that things are not working well, you can have a fast rollback and really not harm the production experience. Let's talk a little bit about the cons. So in terms of cons, we have the need to monitor latency, traffic errors, and saturation. So monitoring takes up effort, and it's effort that you're going to need to invest in order to make these decisions. However, you can also mitigate this by introducing monitoring systems that create notifications and triggers, or they can even halt automatically or roll out or even roll back automatically based on this feedback. So it makes this process automated, it makes it easy, it makes it based on very specific metrics and triggers. Your audience will either more people will be exposed to this new great feature, or if something goes wrong, you can drain back automatically. So there's a lot of also mitigations that you can put in place for that. It can introduce technical debt. So feature flags, as I mentioned, is a logical condition. You have an if or else in your code. Whereas previously you only had one statement, so you didn't have if or else. When you get to that 100% rollout, there's really no reason to hold on to that else. And so there is tech debt in your code that you're going to need to make sure there's a process to clear. And that's kind of how you mitigate that con. And the last con is that it's much more complicated to understand customer scenarios. So imagine that you're a customer support engineer and you have a user calling up and saying that they have a problem. Not all the users are seeing exactly the same interface. So you have to understand what this customer is seeing rather than another customer. But a really nice way to mitigate that is to introduce configuration files that you can see in logs or breadcrumbs that can be stored and easily understood if a customer does contact that call center. So in conclusion, you can see there's much more pros than there are cons when we're talking about progressive delivery. When you want to test in production, it's important to monitor the system and to have an easy way to roll back. The different factors of progressive delivery are environments and users. When controlling environments, developers can deliver features progressively into their environments to limit exposure when new code is deployed. When it's done for users, users are segmented in such a way, it can be arbitrary like a percentage, Or it could be like a specific identifier, like we talked, like domain, like a tier, like a premium or ultimate tier, or by some kind of logic in your application, like we gave that example for the songs in the playlist. The developer then progressively delivers the changes exposed to that set of users. And really, it's all about that feedback loop and about making a conscious decision whether you can continue to roll out or if you need to roll back. When we think about the change in the state of mind, even the ownership of features and production changes, originally features were owned by the engineering team or by the DevOps or the SRE teams. And now once a feature hits production, ownership moves to people closer to the customers. It could be release managers, product managers, customer support teams, and they can get that feedback really directly from the customer. And what this does is it frees up more time for developers to work on their newer developments. I want to thank you for participating in this session today. Feel free to give me any feedback, or if you have questions or comments, you can email me at olgalowinski@gitlab.com, or my Twitter handle is go_or read. Thanks for being here. And now let's get back to work.